auto sequence start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And now, on with the show.
I am Dawn Cunningham of the Soul Goals podcast, and happiness for me is connection.
Okay, Don Cunningham, thank you so much for joining us and being on our show. You've got the Soul Goals podcast, right?
I do, yes. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be guesting on the show today and giving you a little bit more insight about what it is that this platform is doing. And I love your platform too. I think it's great anytime we can spread connection and positivity on any kind of larger platform. I think it's imperative for people to hear and for people to have access to.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And thank you for the kind words. I think anytime you're trying to do that, I think, and just bring people together, especially in today's world, I think it's so important. So
absolutely.
Your show, it's not only a podcast, it's kind of a movement because you're trying to educate people on connecting mind, body, soul, faith, and being able to learn from one another, right? Right.
I think the biggest thing for me when I started it was that I felt like connection for people was such an imperative part. And so I say the word imperative all the time, but I just feel very, very, very led to that because I think it's a really, really big part of who we are as people and that we're meant to connect with other people. And I think that relatability is a big part of that connection and understanding that we all go through things. By having the stories that we had in the first year from our guests and them being so vulnerable and so willing to share their personal growth, their personal path, from cancer survivors to accident survivors to people that have been in addictions for a number of years that have come out to the other side of it, sharing their experience and how they managed to process through that. I think that really gives that relatability to a lot of people that just don't feel like they have the ability to reach out and ask for help or really that they feel like they're alone. Like they don't have, like they're the only ones in this ship. There's no one else that is dealing with it or has dealt with it. So I think that gets to be like an insurmountable thing. So that connection and that relatability are the two really largest things that I wanted to address when we went into this whole platform. And now we're in year 2 and we're taking it in a little bit different direction, more of a personal growth process where I have a great co-host named Dixie from here in Nashville. And the idea for this year is to follow through with different exercises, if you will, like personal growth exercises. And Dixie and I do one of those a week. And then we come on and talk about them in an effort to show you what they've done for us or what they could do for you. So you then have choice about, hey, I'm really struggling with X, Y, or Z. They said something that really hit me that I went, maybe I should look into that. And it's really easy, accessible things that doesn't cost money to do, but it costs elbow grease and like mind grease, if you will. Mm-hmm. It takes a lot to make those choices.
Do you find that you guys are learning just as much as maybe they are? And maybe have you ever come across someone who's had the same experiences and you're able to kind of, by these stories, help each other along the way?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like the feedback that we have gotten specifically in that year 1 with all of the stories that we were able to share has just been, it spoke to me. It's changed me as a person. Just, like when you hear somebody's information and their story about how challenging a piece of their life was, and they're willing to share that with you, it just really creates, again, I go back to that connection and relatability that we're not alone and we are meant to do this life with other people connected with them and supporting one another, not just them supporting you, but you supporting them. I think a big part of the movement that we're trying to create this year is like we just did a couple weeks ago, we did a pay it forward, and not like random acts of kindness, but paying it forward, how that helps you as the person that's paying it forward to really feel kind of plugged into that whole process as well and what that does for you. So I think that this whole the platform as a whole for me has definitely changed the way I've looked at different situations in my own life personally. And I really believe no matter how old we are, like we're here to evolve. We are here to be challenged. We are here to grow, and we're here to grow in multiple levels, in multiple ways, emotionally, mentally, definitely spiritually, and plugging ourselves into the pieces that really fit for us, that resonate with us, so that we can be a better person for our family. We can be a better person for ourselves. We can be a better person for our work, for those that just surround us on a daily basis.
I think we definitely speak the same language when it comes to storytelling, and that's kind of what we always try to do, even in our work and corporate and pitching ideas for networks. And we always kind of try to base everything in the human spirit, the human element, because I think that's so important to, whether you're watching a movie or TV, you're talking to someone. If you can relate and know that they've been through a similar situation, I think it's so important. How important is storytelling, I guess, to the healing process? I mean, I know if we connect, it makes us feel better, but for healing, for something that you've been through, just to know someone else has done that and maybe to see them on the other side, that's huge, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think that when we feel that we are in the weeds, I like to call it, like we are so deeply entrenched in our stuff and in our process that is challenging. And I mean, like all the levels, there's not one level worse nor better than another, because we all are different human beings with different emotions and different pieces. I think that it's really important to keep in mind that healing and letting your words and your story out of your container, if you will, is a big piece of getting to the other side. So when hearing other people's process, again, I think it just goes back to that whole idea of we have to be present for one another, for ourselves to heal. And part of that is allowing someone to have the space to tell their story and give their information, because it heals everybody. And I really think it's hard. I mean, like it's really, really hard. Dixie and I had this conversation a couple weeks ago on the podcast. It's hard to choose to do something that you know is going to benefit you in the long run. It's like, do you want to run the sprint or do you want to run the marathon? like sprinting, I give you, like if you don't like to run, you're not going to want to run a sprint or a marathon. But that sprint it's quick. Like we want that answer. We want that. And I'm just the same way, like with my stuff from the past. I wanted that answer. Just tell me what I need to do. We'll get through it, wrap it up in a box, and here we are. But the marathon is really what we're here to do. The marathon is what we have to accomplish, because we're here in these bodies for a good piece of time, God willing. And to be able to let those stories be heard, let those stories out of us in a way that is in a safe situation and in a safe space, whether that's through therapy, whether that's through spiritual advising, whether that's through, connection to another soul in your family, somebody that really can hold that information for you. I just really, really feel that we are so vitally here to connect and to work through our stuff and to be the best version of ourselves that we can be. And making that choice to do that work and let those stories out is hard. So
most definitely. It's kind of like having a chronic condition health-wise. You have to look at it as, I'm going to have this my whole life. I need to be able to manage it and to cope. It's not going to go away overnight. I mean, we sometimes are our own worst enemies in our emotions and our thoughts.
Yeah.
And I feel like if we can focus on the reality of it and look at facts and not base a situation on our emotion, feel it and let it absorb, let it flow over you. But look at the facts of a situation and know, okay, I am a good person. This is going to be okay. If you just talk your way down off of that ledge a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, letting go of the fact, and this is really hard for me. Like this has been so hard. I'm such a doer in this life that when I am in a situation that is completely outside of my control and I can't do anything about it, what can I do? What are the actions that I can take? So sometimes that means, okay, I'm in my brain. I need to go out and go for a walk. I'm in my brain too much. I'm anxious. What's the best benefit for me? Maybe I need a journal. Maybe I need to call a friend and just say, hey, I just give me 8 minutes. There was actually a scientific study done that if you talk, and I don't remember who it was that did it. Forgive me for not notating that, but it was an 8 minutes is really what you need to get to the other side if you're struggling with something in terms of talking to someone, whether it's a crisis intervention line, whether that's a friend that, like I said, is a safe space for you to be able to have that conversation. But it only takes that bit of time for you to go, oof, to let some of that intensity go. But again, I think it goes back to that choosing to do those elements that make us better and that get us from here to the next level here so that we are safe, we are whole, we feel capable, and we feel empowered in our own bodies and our own minds. I think that's hard because I go back to the whole fact that it's something you can't control. You know, I have 2 daughters that are collegiate athletes, and it's like, what can you control? You can control your attitude and your effort. And it's really all that we can control. And I hate to say that because I'm the biggest, I'm the biggest one that's hard on myself about that. That's my cross to bear.
It's so hard, but I think it also just kind of, it's a relief when you actually get to that point where you think, okay, there's only a small amount that I can control. So you have to give everything else up and give it to God and give it up because we only have so little that we can change how we feel about a certain situation, but ultimately it's going to be what it is. So you have to just, wow. Well, I'm interested in your background. Like, how did you get to this point or idea of combining the physical and spiritual? Was that a long journey for you?
Well, I come from a background of addiction myself personally with trauma along the way. So I don't think that I'm unique in that path necessarily. So over the course of years of healing and the work and the therapy and all the things that went into dealing with those different pieces that presented themselves for me, I think I finally got to a point where I was a personal trainer for over 20 years. And I still do that. I still do programming for different groups, and I still do programming for musical artists. I do live in Nashville, so that's kind of a fun little thing that I get to do.
Yeah.
But now, as I've gone through my path, I realize that the physical layer is not all that there is. So the emotional and the mental space and how that is woven into what we do physically and vice versa is such an integral part of becoming a whole person. And then so if I'm thinking about a client that had a really hard time losing weight, I'm seeing her, this has been years ago, 3 times a week. We are doing like everything that we can. She's food logging. She is exercising. She's doing things outside of the gym. And I know that she's doing that. She's trying really hard. And at the end of about 8 weeks, 2 months, she wasn't seeing the results that she should have been seeing. And I remember her sitting down and just breaking down after a session one day and being like, really letting some of her stuff out. Because at that point, she felt like it was safe enough to be able to talk about it. And I said, you know what, let's replace one of our sessions a week with some kind of therapy that would help you in this piece that you just gave me, this information you just gave me. And literally by doing that, unloading that stuff in a place for her, she started to lose weight. She started to feel better about herself as a person, as a whole. And you could just see the weight just lift off of her, figuratively and, metaphorically. So for me, seeing those experiences in my past work has been, well, there's something to it. And like when I realized that these bicep curls are for my client are not going to change your life. I mean, they're going to help you get from this point to this point. But then you have ultimate choice after that. And what is that choice going to be? And what do you need around you to be able to make that choice? Because I don't want to make it sound like, hell yeah, all you got is choice. Because we do have choice, but it's really hard to make those choices. So sometimes you need extra crutches. You need extra support, extra, I'll call it scaffolding around you. You need extra scaffolding to kind of build you up. So is that group therapy? Is that a friend? Is that connecting with somebody once a week to go for coffee? Is that connecting with a friend that you're going to meet and walk your dogs at lunch, twice a week? Is that reaching out to community so that there's somebody there for me. There's an accountability piece there for me. And so making this choice is just a little bit, maybe a little bit easier, maybe 1% easier. It's all it's got to be. All it's got to be.
Do you think there's a misconception of you get through the addiction, you lose the weight, you're still there. You are still the same inside. You still have to deal with that. And then sometimes you think, okay, now what? I've accomplished that goal. I've gotten through that. What do I do now? And I think that's where what you said plays into that, to have that support.
Yeah. I think that we're all just here on this piece, on this floating rock in the universe, really. Like, we're all here to evolve, right? We're all here to grow. And I think when you get to that point, I really wish there was like a magical fairy that could like ding, put that wand on top of your head and say, all right, it's all good. It's all taken care of. You got through this. You're not going to struggle with it anymore. Yep. But the concepts that you learn in the struggle are really what saves you in your next piece. Those are the elements that you can then take with you to help let someone else know, hey, I've been through this. This is what worked for me. Or when you're in it, because I'm not going to lie. I mean, there's pieces of my days that I'm like, and I want to go back into those old places. It's hard not to go back to those places, but it comes back to that choice. And I've been given this information that I know that works for me. I've tried it. It's been hard to do, but it's made a difference. So now I have a choice to either sit in my shit, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to feel that stuff. It's not about turning off what you're feeling. That's a big piece. I do want to make sure that listeners know it's not about not feeling what you're feeling. It's really important to feel that because it's a flashing yellow light for a reason. There's something there for you to notate, to understand, and to be aware of. The thing that you have to make a conscious choice about is not staying in that country for too long. Mm-hmm. You have to pack your bags and go, all right, I deserve to be in a better place. I am enough. I can do this. And I'm worthy enough to do this work for myself, to be what I'm supposed to be. I deserve it. I deserve to be happy. I deserve to be healthy. We all do. We really all do. And like I said earlier, it's do you need more scaffolding around you to help get you to that point? Yeah. Because reaching out and asking someone for help is so, so important.
I think we do sometimes too. There's a stigma around that, maybe like you don't either want to share what you're going through because you're embarrassed, but I think if you have those true blue people around you, they're going to understand and they're not going to judge you. I mean, that's right. A real friend.
Yeah,
exactly. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, exactly. I was just agreeing with you. That's completely true. Absolutely.
You mentioned there are days you have those moments sometimes during the day. And I know everybody has those who've been through something. What is that? Is it the feeling of that's the comfort that you kind of reminisce about those times and think, and talk about that a little bit and what that draw is?
Yeah, I think that we get really comfortable with our path. And I think that when we are in a place that is not positive for us, it's hard to change that because that's all that we may have known. And so change is really uncomfortable. I had a therapist say at one point, this is so great. The pain of change is sometimes worse than the pain of staying the same. Mm. So like for us, changing and stepping outside of what we have known in an addiction, in a relationship, in any confine that has kind of held us is easier to stay there than it is to make the choice to do something different because we don't know it's the unknown. That's the control thing we were talking about earlier. Like we don't know what that is. So if we stay where we are, oddly, it's comfortable, even though we're really uncomfortable and we're really unhappy or we're really not well. It's not that you have to leave that relationship. It's not that you have to say this isn't working. It's about finding how you respond to it instead of react. Like responding versus reacting is a really big piece that I have to call in. I laugh about it pretty much on the daily. Like if you get something that triggers you, whether I'm in traffic, whether one of my family members says something to me it's not about me, it's about their day, and it's about
Yeah.
something that's happened to them, I have to go, okay, I'm going to respond and not react. But that it takes a while to get to that point where you feel like that's okay and what that is for you. And I do want to say too that everybody's place to get there, everybody's ability to get to that place is different. And everybody's process to get to that place is different. But when we hear other stories of relatability and connection and, hey, I did this, I've been there, this is what's happened to me. If they can find 1%, like I say, just that 1% to go, all right, I have a little hope. Like there's a little hope for me. If this person went through X, Y, and Z, I can do this. I can do this.
And I guess too, if you look at it that way, it's, I guess it gives you that community in a way that people have been through that situation. And I think about what comes to mind too is this month, October being breast cancer awareness. I think that is such a huge one for people that it's so scary to get that diagnosis. But if the community around you, knowing someone else has gone through that and they're healthier on the other side, I use that because we're in that month, but I think it could be anything that you're going through.
Yeah.
Just to know, like you said, there are people around, there are stories now online. People write about that. They blog, they journal. So I think the more information you can get about a scary situation, I think that's only helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's that fear of the unknown. When we don't know what's on the other side of where we are, whether we're entrenched in dysfunction or entrenched in addiction, moving beyond that point can seem so daunting and so just overwhelming to the point where you just continue to sit. And like you said, hearing other people's stories about the struggle and where they've gotten to and how they did that for themselves, it's imperative. It really is.
Do you think that maybe you mentioned getting out of a relationship, do you think sometimes that's what holds people in those relationships, even though it's bad and it's abusive? It's still in a weird way, maybe they know how bad it's going to be. So I don't want to use the word comfortable, but it's in a weird way it is. That's kind of maybe at least I know that it's going to be bad, but at least I'm comfortable and I recognize that situation. About, people may wonder sometimes, why don't they just leave, or why don't they just, there's so many elements though involved. I think that's another huge situation.
Yeah. And I really don't think that any of us honestly know the intricate parts rather of everybody's process. We really don't. So it's not like we're going to sit here and say, oh, you should do this and you should do this and you should do this, because, we would write a book about that and everybody would be good. They'd feel great. But I think part of the struggle is where our growth comes from and how we respond to that struggle and how we react to that struggle and how we process through that struggle. So to kind of go back to that, that if you're using the example of it being in a relationship that's not great and staying in something while other people are looking at it from the outside going, why doesn't that person just do something about it? I mean, there's a real powerlessness to move out of that space for a lot of people because they don't know how to do it. They don't, the unknown is the biggest piece. Like, I know what's going to happen in this situation because it's happened before. So if I stay here, at least I know the story. Mm-hmm. I don't know the story if I decide to do something different. Like it's an open meadow. So for some people, you get to a point where you're like, okay, well, that open meadow feels refreshing. But for, I would say probably 99% of people, that open meadow is scary.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I don't know what's there.
Mm-hmm. I'd rather stay in the situation where at least I know.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like that. What's that saying? Know the enemy that you know sometimes is more comfortable than the enemy you don't.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, okay, I know what's coming. I know what expected, but there are those good times too. I think that's the classic case of the abusive relationship, that there are horrible times, but then you cling to those. Okay, well, once in a while it's good, or and that maybe kind of keeps people locked in too.
Yeah. Yeah. And ultimately it's like, if we're talking about relationships, that's, without getting too psychological about it. I mean, it's just a dysfunctional connection that
Yeah.
the individuals have. And that could run a gamut of different things. And there are numerous therapists that can give information about what that would be for your path necessarily. And I'm just here to say, I am such an advocate for therapy, and not just when you are in the trenches and having a hard time with life. It's almost like your exercise to keep your body healthy, to keep your heart healthy, your cardiovascular exercise you do to keep your heart beating at its best and most efficient way. I just think this is exercise for your soul, and doing those pieces of work that maybe your therapist or your counselor suggests in the place where you're at. Kind of like I was saying, that Dixie and I are experimenting this year with, to bring that to people so that they can say, oh, this works. I like this. I definitely don't like that. Those challenges, if you can stick with those things, I just think that there's so much more on the other side of it. And we're always working to refine ourselves, refine our souls. We're always working to do that. And we always will be. I do want to share a situation where our household is kind of in a little bit of a really uncontrollable situation with a family member that we can't do much about. And I remember, like, we're praying for it. We're saying, whatever is to happen is supposed to happen. And literally, there's nothing that the decision about a bunch of different things is completely outside of where we are. And as we pray for, please direct us, please have this situation rectify in the best possible way for everybody involved, it felt like more bad stuff was happening. Like, we were getting more, it's just more stuff is unraveling. And I remember thinking and saying to my husband, like, dude, like, the more that I'm praying about this, the worse it's becoming. This is like taking me back to the Wayback Machine. Like, the more I prayed for, please, like, give me peace, please. I need connection, please. When I was in the middle of my stuff, it's like, it's stripping it away. And I think that someone gave me a really great analogy that God can't create the new without cleaning out the old. Because what we've done in our confine is we've built a story, and he can't create and introduce the new on top of an old story that hasn't been working. So we're really cleaning house. So those prayers in that way, and those petitions in that way, are a way for us to, that's our struggle, and that's our letting go of control. And therefore, then when you hear, this is for me, when I hear those wonderful stories of people that have let go and really connected and like plugged into their faith, it's like, oh, wow, okay, that had to be totally stripped from them to be able to build a new foundation.
That's so true. I think sometimes we look at God as a genie in a bottle. We rub it like it's supposed to happen overnight,
Yeah.
And that hits so hard with me because it's a similar situation. Like, I prayed about something and it just seems like, man, I just got hit a day after day. Like, it's like, God, this is getting worse. But it's like you said, it's ultimately you're clearing away the negativity and the bad stuff out of your life so that he can, it's kind of like you remodel a house, or you have to clean everything out before you can build on that new.
Yeah. And it's like you're pruning the garden, if you will. I mean, you have to cut the grass before, like, I think we have this monkey grass outside of our house, and I have to weed eat it down at a certain time each year so that the new will grow through when it comes back to, when it all comes through.
Exactly. Yeah. You can't do anything about the old. You've got to clear it out. It's dead. You no longer need it in your life. You've got to clear that out.
And I just want to say too, that's not easy.
No.
Like, none of this is easy.
No.
None of this is easy.
Gardening is not easy. You got to get it down on your knees. You got to get dirty. It's a process.
Right.
For sure.
Life is a process for all of this. And I want the listeners to take away the fact that we are not sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns by saying this. That's not what it's about. It's about understanding that there is a way out, but you have to be able to find that way for you. And in hoping, by bringing this platform kind of to this life in this way, that there is a connection and a relatability that you can find to give you that 1% to move to that next space that you need for you.
Absolutely. In the world today, well, what do you think's going on with everyone seems to be not, the division that's going on. We've kind of lost that ability to not only have a conversation, but also just to listen to one another and have that empathy. I think everybody's in such a hurry. Have you ever seen a time where we've been this? I mean, I know in the history of our country, there have been horrible things that have happened.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that we talked to people who've been here before, but have you noticed that? Have you noticed the people you talk with that everybody just feels like there's a division there?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's the louder we speak about how we're divided, the more divided we are.
Yeah.
It's the focus of what you're focusing on is what you're hearing the most. And a lot of people could say, if you believe in the law of attraction and manifestation, that what you focus on is what you get more of. So you could take it to that level. But if I'm thinking fundamentally as just regular Joes, you and I talking today, that when we focus on that, we just hear, the volume turns up on that.
Yeah.
And it's not about not addressing it and being unrealistic. That's not it at all. It's about hearing it, or it's about feeling our emotions, letting them flow through, connecting to what is really your trigger, and then saying, okay, I felt it. I don't have to hang on to it. I don't have to rewrite these chapters repeatedly. Like I think about when I used to work with private clients regularly, I'd say, okay, let's think of year 1 is chapter 1. Year 30 is chapter 30. If you want to call, like by your birth date, you can literally look back if you want to think figurative, super figurative person here. But if you are writing your book, if you will, and you look back at chapter 15, when you were 15 years old, you can go back and highlight all the things. You can dog ear the pages. You can underline all the stuff that happened. But in year 35, you can't, you have 2 choices. You can redo year 15 the same way, or you can write your story differently. You can choose to do it differently. So in terms of division, like you talked about, I think that the more we focus on those aspects, the more of that we get, the more we rewrite that same scenario. And I don't know, I mean, I'm not your, it's like I said earlier, it's not sunshine and rainbows kind of thing all the time, but it's how we respond versus how we react. And I think we're in a culture, in a space now where we are very reactive, extremely reactive. And it's hard to listen to someone to respond versus hearing someone to respond. And it's a lot of work, especially if we feel triggered by something that they've said or that they've done.
Yeah.
But it's worth it. It's worth it for that connection and that relationship, to find that space of, I'm going to listen to respond, not listen to react.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes too, in listening to respond, we don't sometimes listen to understand before we respond. And that's a key issue too. I think we need to maybe take a step back and just really kind of understand where that person's coming from, even if they've had a bad day, or we never know what's going on with someone.
Never.
But it is so easy to react because you've got some negative kind of scratchy things that are coming your way. It's easy to just react to that. But it's not, like you said, nothing about this is easy, but it is worth it on the other side.
Right. And you just brought up, like, we don't know what other people are dealing with. Like, we don't know their story. We don't know their mourning. We don't know the news they may have gotten before they step into this business meeting with us, and their reactivity is this way. It does not discount that it's hurtful potentially, but we also have to understand that there's a piece that belongs to them and there's a piece that belongs to us. So what can we do to help us be gracious, loving, and kind to ourselves in that situation, but also to the person that may be having something going on that has nothing to do with us? And I have to remind myself of that too. Like, if my husband's had a really hard day with work, or a really terrible interaction with a constituent in his work, and he comes home and there's a blow up that happens. I have to remember that sometimes it's not about me, and it's about what's happened to him. Yeah. And that's okay. It's not that it's not okay. It's just life.
Yeah.
And to be able to separate that is hard, I think, for us. It goes back to that respond versus react. And like you said, listening to understand is a big, big thing. That's very hard. And if you go back to that division, I think that's a big piece that keeps us divided as community and whole.
I mean, work is a big one, isn't it? I mean, with everybody, yeah, there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of stress.
Yeah,
Work is a big trigger, I think, for a lot of us.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you think, are we teaching our kids maybe as we should in this generation of social media to be able to look at stories, be able to story tell, be able to understand someone? It seems like the generations now where everything is fast, everything is reactive on social media. You don't like something, you throw in a comment,
Yeah.
and it hurts on both sides, because if someone's out there trying to do something on social media and they get a lot of negative comments, it's devastating sometimes for someone younger or older that, they can go down a rabbit hole with that.
Yeah.
I think
I
it's
think
just,
that,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think that part of that is being comfortable in your own skin. I think that's a big piece. And if you talk about kids, like I know that and we have 2 daughters, and I know that as they've grown, the biggest thing that I learned in my healing was what I needed to give them. And what that ended up being for us is they needed to know that I was listening, that I'm hearing them, and that if they are sideways, like in their teenage years or in their adolescent years, like hormones are crazy and friendships are crazy and school is crazy. And like, I have to recall and remember that I was in that space one time and I was frustrated, and their world is different than what our world is as adults. So our stresses of paying our house notes, paying our car notes, making sure we have enough money for groceries, making sure the job is working so that we can provide. It's not the same for them, And so understanding that their confines are so much different and their concerns are so much different, I think that gives us as parents a piece where we can then sit back and go, okay, I just have to remember I was in their shoes at one point. School and grades were a big thing for me at one point. Friendships, relationships were a big thing for me at one point. And that if I keep in mind that that's their life, then maybe I can hear it differently.
Yeah.
And I can just let them vent about it. I can let them just release it. And especially in a day and age, like you said, where social media is so fast and so in your face and everything that goes along with it. And I think too, another thing that I was given in my therapy is that people that are hurt, including myself, tend to hurt other people. We say hurtful things when we are hurting ourselves.
Yeah.
And being able to separate and take responsibility for our responses and our words, whether that's with our kids, with our spouses, with our coworkers, with the person at the coffee shop that we're getting a coffee from.
Yeah.
I think that's another really imperative piece. And it all boils back to how we feel about ourselves as a whole and feeling worthy enough. Not that we are more important than the guy that collects my garbage every Friday morning. We are all of importance. We are all here for multiple reasons to be able to create and to be able to love and to be able to connect. But I think at the heart of ourselves and the heart of our beings and our souls, we were meant to give, to love, and to understand that we are worthy of that same pullback, if you will.
It goes back to being connected. I think that's, knowing and understanding where someone is or what they're going through before we react, just to kind of take that small beat to realize, okay, maybe they've had a bad day. Or if we can all get to that point again where we're connected and we're having those conversations, I think we can only grow from that,
Yeah. It was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I inked a tattoo on my arm that says pause, the semicolon, and then breathe with the semicolon, and then resume. And I think there's a lot of times where, this is what we try to tell our girls, like, you don't have to respond immediately. Like if you get a big old red flag screaming, screaming trigger at you, I think it's in your best interest to just pause, right? Take a breath and then go, all right, well, how do I need to respond to this? What is the best course for me? What do I need to do in this point, in this situation?
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, that's a great, your tattoo. That's a great saying, because I think that's a good thing to remember for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's only you're protecting yourself then too before you react to someone else. I think a lot of times, as my wife likes to say, put your own oxygen mask on before you help someone else. So that's
Absolutely.
yeah, you have to make sure you're in a good place before you can talk to someone else and help them through.
And you're protecting that relationship too.
Yeah.
You know, you're working to protect that relationship, and the person on the other side in that relationship will feel that, will pull that, will then go, oh, wow. Okay. That's okay. It's a ripple effect. It really is. And
Yeah.
I don't want it to sound like, oh, it's all great and we can all do this so easily, because it's hard work. It's hard. And I don't do a great job of it every day. I really don't. But I do know that from where I was probably 30 years ago to where I am now, I feel different in my skin. I feel more that I have the ability to make choices that are beneficial to me and my soul. And I want other people to know that you have that ability, and that it's within your reach. You can do it. You can do that. And that you are enough. You're enough.
Yeah. And the journey is something to be proud of. I mean, that where you've come from, looking back on that, I mean, it's a huge thing. So it's something to be proud of for sure.
Yeah. And I think too, if we look back at addictions and journeys and hard things too, I will say one thing that 99.9% of my guests said is that they would not change their path. Like they would not change the struggle they went through, because it was what helped shape them into the person that they are now, and give them those tools and give them that peace and make them understand how they can help someone else and grow themselves even more.
Where do you find your guests? Do you do a lot of research and find these great stories?
So a lot of them are friends that I've had along the way, that I've reached out to, that I know had incredible stories. And then that was just, we go back to the ripple effect. A lot of them were saying, oh, hey, by the way, I have a really great friend that I went to college with, and this is what happened to her. I think she'd be willing to tell her story. And then we just reach out and make a connection. I will say that first year, my goal for the podcast that first year was to get 52 stories, 52 weeks. And it was hard.
Yeah.
It was hard. People don't necessarily want to share those darker parts of themselves initially. And there was a lot of, I'm not sure if I really feel like this. And there was a lot of sitting and kind of waiting for them to really pray about it and think about, am I willing to? And then there are some people that are like, yes, absolutely. When are we going to let's talk yesterday? Let's do it right away. So finding those people to have those conversations was challenging at first, but then that ripple effect of people going, okay, yeah, I see what's happening here. This makes sense. I'm super willing to share. I'm really willing to give my information to be able to help someone else.
I know it's probably impossible to pick, but is there one that you can think of that really touched you or really changed you as a person, maybe, or like surprised you maybe?
Yeah, there are two that they're all great. And I could say something about literally every one of them, but one of them is a woman from North Carolina that has become a dear friend of mine that went through breast cancer. And her story is similar to all breast cancer survivors, the ups and the downs and the emotions that she felt. But I had known her before. However, her vulnerability on the podcast and what she told me was so endearing and so just so gracious. I had no idea that she felt the way she did. I had no idea the other things she was dealing with in her family while she was in treatment for breast cancer herself. And then I had another guest from the Nashville area. He's a sportscaster here in our area, and super motivational. Big Joe Dubin is his name. And I love Joe. Our kids had gone to school together for a couple of years in one of the schools here in Nashville, and got to know him through that and kind of watched his path. And when I had him on the show, I love it. My older daughter has it written on her mirror: one day or day one. We have the choice. One day, like one day I'm going to do this, or day one. This is day one. I'm going to do it. And I just really feel like that's a really big piece to that choice that we talk about, in being able to move out of that comfortable discomfort that we talked about earlier. Yeah, it's either going to be, I'm going to make it different, or I'm going to stay here.
I think that's huge, because you can wake up that next day after it's happened and say to yourself, okay, what am I going to do? Am I going to begin this journey out, or am I going to just still kind of soak in it? And maybe, that's not doing yourself any good.
No,
for sure. You got to move. Yeah,
you do. And I will say too, it takes you getting to a certain point to make that conscious choice that you're going to, it's day one or one day. Sometimes we have to sit in that gunk for a very long period of time to realize, I don't want to sit in this gunk anymore. And there's no timetable on it. Like, you could be doing healing work when you're 16 years old for stuff. You could be doing your healing work when you're 60 years old. And it's all important. And the process from the path from A to Z is never linear. It's just never linear.
But never the idea, that's for sure.
Yeah, but the idea though is that we can connect with other people that have had those non-linear paths, and hearing how they did it will help us go, okay, maybe there is a little bit for me. Maybe I can do that.
Yeah.
Maybe I could stick my big toe out today and try that. Maybe I need to make a phone call to somebody today.
Yeah.
Maybe this is the day where I go, I am powerless to change this and I need help. And then the door opens and you see this much light, just a little bit of light. That's all you need to make a change. You just need a fraction of light in a dark room to make it different.
I like to say too, like, you don't need to see the entire staircase to take that first step. You just have to make sure you take that one step and then just keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to trust that, because then our human psyches are like, I want to know what's going on. For me, I remember in my therapy early on, I told my therapist, I'm like, if I could just say this and you could just give me a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, I can check it off when I do it and I'll be good. And she just sat there and looked at me. She was great. She's like, I really wish that I could do that for you.
Yeah. Yeah. We often want to know from God, okay, show me how it's going to turn out, and I'll promise I'll do it, but show me how it's going to be. But that's not part of the process. We have to have faith that it's all going to be okay. And ultimately, I think everything may not go exactly the way you want it, but I think everything's going to be okay. I mean, I've tried to realize that, and it's kind of part of how I kind of deal with things, knowing, okay, look, what could be the worst of the worst, and then so.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow, my friend. Well, you're doing great things over there on the show and what you're doing in everything you do. So I thank you again for taking this time for us. It's been really fun. Great talking to you.
Yeah, same, right back at you, right back at what you're doing. I think the more that we can create that movement of graciousness, positivity, and understanding for other people, that's when you see that division that you talked about start to melt a little bit, even if it just melts a little bit.
Just 1%, right?
Yeah, just 1%. That's it. That's all you need.
How can people contact you, and where can they find Soul Goals?
Yeah, so I am on YouTube, but also am on Instagram. It's the easiest probably place to find it is the.soul, SOUL, .goals, GOALS. That's on Instagram. All of our podcasts are linked in our bio. They're on Instagram. It's really the easiest place to go to find it. You can also find us streaming on all the platforms, the Soul Goals podcast on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeart, and other random platforms along the way as well. And like I said, also on YouTube is the video version. It's not the greatest version because I'm not the master the master engineer. One day that will be different. One day I will have an engineer taking care of it all for me.
Oh yeah, that's
Yes.
definitely you will. I have no doubt. And you guys have a great journal too, right? People can
We
order.
do, and actually, right now it is offline. We are not. We've taken it off the market just because I felt like we are doing a really interesting thing for this next 52 weeks for this year.
Okay.
So the Soul Goals Journal is a process for working through one exercise a week. And when I talked to Dixie about co-hosting with me, I said, you know what? I think I'm going to take the journal down so that we can then look at these different pieces and go, okay, now, and then I can rewrite. It's almost like the second edition, if you will. So the journal will be available near mid 2025 is when we have slated that for to be released. But that will be advertised widespread on all of our socials.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. Hopefully we can stay in touch and collaborate. And thank you. It's been great.
Yeah, absolutely. I've really enjoyed the conversation, Jason. And thank you for what you're doing as well. It's important work.
Thank you.
Happiness Sold Separately is created and hosted by Jason Hensley and is produced by Makash Films. Music by Soundstripe. Narration by Lauren Gobis. If you or someone you know is in crisis and needs immediate help, call the National Mental Health Hotline at 866-903-3787. We would be honored if you would rate, share, and subscribe. From the entire Happiness Sold Separately team, thank you for listening.